G'day, Happy New Year, and welcome to Cocktails, Controversy and Conservation for 2021. I'm Jacqui, the Organising Director here at NCC, and it's great to have you back for another year, so thanks for joining us. We have something a little bit different tonight, and for the next 2 weeks of Cocktails, we'll be bringing you our summer series, which is a pre-record that Chris and I did on our trip out west in November last year, when we drove to the Pilliga and then along the Barker River, talking to all different users along the river about water licences and the government's management of the Darling Barker. I also have some exciting news that we've turned Cocktails, Controversy and Conservation into a podcast called Voices for Nature. If you jump onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts and search for Voices for Nature, you can find us and listen to all the sessions of Cocktails that we've done from the last year. And if you can, subscribe and rate us so that we can reach more people with this series. And also, as always, please head along to nature.org.au/donate. It's thanks to the support of people just like you that we're able to do this work. So it really does mean the world for you to make a donation to us. And without further ado, tonight's Cocktails was recorded at Kallara Station. Chris and I spoke to Justin McClure and Stuart the Lievre, who are graziers along the river. And I hope you get as much out of hearing from them as I did. G'day, so we're here in Bourke in northwestern New South Wales on the lands of the Barkindji and Ngamba people on the Darling River at the Bourke Weir.
So this weir is critically important to the whole river system really. How much water spills over the edge determines things like pumping limits, but it also most importantly determines how much water there just is in the river available to the towns along the river, any kind of farming or irrigation, and most importantly of course to just keeping it as a river and keeping it flowing and making sure that nature continues to thrive down the river. So it's really important. Just this morning the water stopped spilling over the edge, so this is bad news really for the rest of summer. Where we're standing right here, Jacqui, like in March,
this would have all been underwater.
So you can see the sort of railing just in the background there. The water level was right up to the railing. So we're here with Stuart from Yethonga Station, which is how far away? Down, you flew here, so...
Yeah, it's about a quarter of an hour.
Quarter of an hour, what, in a plane?
Yep.
Okay, so how many k's is that?
40 k's.
It's not a bad way to get around.
Yeah, beats you right. Well, just depending on how low you get. I'll answer that when I get home.
And Justin from Kallara Station, we're at Kallara Station. This is the Darling River just behind us here, and we've stayed the night. And Justin and Stuart have agreed to have a chat to us about some of the issues with the river and water in the river. But just to start, what do you do here? Tell us about your properties, guys.
Well, mine's fairly basic one. I've just got merino sheep for wool and a few cattle.
And how long have you been doing that?
1860. We first arrived.
Right. What, your family's been here since 1860?
63 or something, isn't it? 63 or 1863, 1866 or something.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So you know the place reasonably well?
You're getting to know it, yeah. Nearly called a local now.
Yeah. And Justin?
Yeah, look, we're similar. We're graziers. We run animals. We used to grow wool sheep 20 years ago, and have done for the 100 years before that. We made a transition into meat sheep and goats, and so we do grazing. We grow a few opportunity crops.
So just for people, most of the people watching this will be in Sydney, won't necessarily know what an opportunity crop is.
Okay, well, we live on the floodplain, and the beautiful river behind us on average floods every 5 years, and when the water comes up and goes across our floodplains, it then recedes, and therefore we may grow a crop 1 year in 5. So we take advantage of the natural flooding regime, and we'll plant cereals onto the floodplain and grow crops, eating for food. It's basically what we do.
Yeah, right. And the rest of the time, what are you grazing?
We graze sheep. We graze meat sheep, and we have sheep for meat for people to eat.
Yeah, right.
And so you were saying yesterday that the lamb here is organic. How did you come to be an organic lamb farmer?
Look, everything we do is organic, and this land is naturally organic. Our low densities of stock mean that our animals aren't confined; they're free range, and our animals have got 10 acres per animal to live on. So there's not the intensive pressure, and hence we haven't got the internal and external parasites that farmers in other areas have. So it's very easy for us to be organic, and it's desirable for us to be organic, and there's a premium for being organic. So we've got the best of worlds here. So we produce organic lamb, we produce organic grain for bread, and predominantly oats.
Yep.
Oats is our staple crop, but we may only grow a crop 1 year in 5.
Yeah. And you mentioned before about when you were talking about the opportunity crops, about when it floods and being on a floodplain. I also know that you're with the Australian Floodplain Association. Can you just tell us a little bit about floodplain harvesting and what that is?
We live on the floodplain. What you see in our wide brown land is a floodplain that over the last million years or whatever, this country floods naturally and has flooded naturally from inflows right up the river. It can rain at Toowoomba, it can rain at Bathurst, and all that water goes past our front door. So traditionally, when it rains everywhere, our river rises, and that's what it is. It's an event river. But it rises up to the top of the banks and it floods thousands of acres on our floodplain. So our flows have reduced over the last 40 years by up to 800% in the peak summer months, which is December, January, February, when our small communities need water.
Yeah.
So floodplain harvesting and any extraction upstream has an impact on what water's in our river outside here.
Yeah, right.
We've already lost that water. And we know we're not ever going to recreate the wheel to roll back time. But what we really need to do is to maintain these small pulse flows, which first of all satisfy the communities, the people who live and breathe and have lived in this country for hundreds and thousands of years. And secondly, these pulse flows add sustenance to the environment and keep the whole ecosystem ticking along. You've seen disasters here in the last 2 years downstream, and that is all to do with drought first, but excessive diversion at times. So management is the key.
Yeah.
So just, I don't know if you've caught up with this news, but just last night in the upper house in New South Wales, a bill was defeated that would have made floodplain harvesting normalised. What's your take on that issue at the moment, and what's government not getting right on that issue?
What they're not getting right on the on floodplain harvesting is that the upstream valleys contribute water to the Barwon Darling, and all of these valleys have water sharing plans. But the major problem is these water sharing plans don't talk to each other. They are like isolated little kingdoms, and they look after themselves 100%, and they have a poor outlook on sharing water. Their view is that the resource is mine while I have it, and why should I share that with anyone else? And until these water sharing plans talk to each other, and there's a global overarching body which we're supposed to have, which is the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, and that body has the power to force different areas to allow the keyword connectivity, and connectivity of these low pulse flows is imperative to the very survival of our communities, the environment, and the way of life that we've lived for the last 150 years.
Yeah.
Stuart, what do you reckon?
Well, I totally agree with Justin about, and it comes, there's something that I don't understand, and I suppose the best way I can put it is that I was at a wedding in Walgett about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and some little pompous so-and-so came up to me and we were talking all sorts of things, but water was off the agenda. This is, and the comment was, only peasants live below Burke.
Right.
Right, which I would react, but to. But that's what we're dealing with, and with that sort of an attitude, and government's got managing that water has that attitude that the political side of it is very simply is that we need this corporatisation of the river, and that is completely and utterly wrong, as we've seen, and there's report after report after report, and I don't know how many more. Right, and floodplain harvesting is just another one. Right, that it's not measured. Right, there are structures there that shouldn't be. That are impeding, water overland flows from getting into the river. And I think, and I've shown people a little place down there which you can nearly see again now. It used to be just hard bedrock. Now it's got 3 foot of silt in it. Now that's just lack of flow. Now I know drought and all that sort of stuff is, but shouldn't we? It's a bit like us as graziers. When things get dry, we have to take a remedial action, and the sooner you do it, the better. So you start feeding early and whatever else, or you sell. Right. So the bucket of water is no longer there. Right. It's nothing like it was 30 years ago. Right. But there has been, and in the meantime, there's been, and I'll take my hat off to the irrigation industry in this one. The inroads they've made into development of crops and high yielding stuff and everything else. Why do they have? Why is it that the government are encouraging outside? Well, I believe to be outside the law, encouraging this over extraction of everything above the Barwon Darling, because we only get 3% of the water natural runoff, roughly 3%. The rest of it's got to be brought in. But there's this government encouraging this sort of stuff now. Is it because, oh dear, we're in trouble, but we've got to pay for it? Is it that? Because there'd be a lot of dollars tied up in it. Or is it a political thing? Or do they actually believe they're doing the right thing? Right? And we know they're not doing the right thing. And there's a priority of water use and all that sort of stuff, and extraction comes down 5 or 6. And that's also all extractions. But it's up the top. Government put it up the top. And that sort of stuff I don't understand. To me, it's just an illegal use. And this is a resource. It's not a commodity, it is a resource, and they need to treat it that way.
Yeah. You mentioned the changes that you've seen in 30 years, over the last sort of 30 years. You're both from families that have, been here for over 100 years. What are some of the changes that you've seen more recently with the river and with those changes in management, the lack of connectivity and things like that you're talking about?
Well, no flows. It's like you get one every 7, 8, 10 years maybe. So we cop and have 2 a year.
Yeah, the whole dynamics, the event flows just aren't happening, and the frequency of flows and the duration of flows just aren't there. And statistically, it's clear as crystal. They're just not happening. And that can be blamed on a lot of things. And climate change is definitely having an influence. Dams in the headwaters are definitely having an influence. Modern farming practices are to trap water and for water to infiltrate into the subsoil to grow. All of these policies have been encouraged by government to manage the system. We're the losers here. The Darling is a loser, and it's a loser for those reasons. And the breakdown, the change is there. It's just been highlighted by, as Stuart said, multiple scientific reports put forward or commissioned by government. The government has commissioned multiple reports, the NRC report, the TESI report, and they all are saying the same thing. And I just ask the question, why aren't government acting upon their own commission reports, which are highlighting a major anomaly in the flows in our iconic rivers? And that there is no bigger effect of diversion of water to an extreme than the disaster of St Menindee and the disasters in the Barwon Darling itself.
I'd go further to say that that actual management of water, right? It's a gross mismanagement of water. You know, people are only allowed to do what the government tells them to do, give or take. Okay. In this case, you could say they've gone above and beyond that. Let somebody else work that out. But government haven't managed, and that is the issue. Now, more political persuasions are guilty of it, right? And I don't understand why they just can't look at it for what it is. They don't need multiple reports to tell them, They've been told more ways than one, They'll probably put it in braille for them just in case, they're going to turn a blind eye to it, just to make them understand. But they still take no notice. And that, to me, becomes the major issue we've got. And everybody else is left high and dry on the bank because of it. Like the irrigators up there, this is not technically it's not about them, okay? It's about government allowing the bad management of a resource. And that's what it's all about, and that's what we need to change. If we don't change that, right, we're in for a long, hard ride. Right, and we're not going to give up. We'll still, we'll keep pounding away in 20 years' time. We hope good sense will prevail between them because we haven't got 20 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Is one of the problems that there are 5 governments in charge of this?
Yes and no. Yes and no. It's policy failure at a high level, and when you talk about policy failure and you talk about intergovernments and government agreements, that can be rectified, but as we know, it takes a major constitutional change to take water away, the power of managing water away from the states. So yes, to answer your question, that's a definite problem. So we need a unified policy, which the Murray-Darling Basin Authority attempted to do. But in the 8 years or 7 years it's been in operation, it's proved to be ineffective. And the single governments are looking after their own interests, as they do. It's a bit like Australia is a united nation, but unfortunately the Constitution doesn't allow federal overarching control of water. So it's something we need to look at.
Just can you explain the licensing regime? So I think a lot of people find water, particularly in the Murray-Darling Basin, a very complicated area, and it is. There's no doubt that it's complicated, but in some ways, I feel like the issues are not that complicated. Like the problem is not that complicated in that there's water that needs to be shared and it's not being shared properly. But can you just explain the sort of licensing regime and how that stuff works?
Well, Chris, I agree, and Justin and I have had this for years, because I don't think it's that complicated. If you obey the law, the legislation as it stands, a lot of this will go away. Right? And good sense would prevail, and it's the only, whatever it is, the minor side of it that you'd end up fixing up. But as it stands at the moment, it's all been manipulated, right? And then, nothing agrees with each other, and everybody can go and do whatever they like, and don't give a stuff about the bloke downstream of them, So, and that's my I know it's simple, and I'm simplifying, but obey the law as it stands, and a lot of it will go away.
Yeah, right. Do you agree with that, Justin?
Look, I think the priority of water, or the hierarchy of water use, is very, very clear. But unfortunately, as the individual states, the individual kingdoms within states don't adhere to the law. human greed is such that if I've got the water and I control the high ground, I can regulate who gets the next bit down. So we've got to share this resource. And unfortunately, it's going to take a big stick approach to make people share this resource. For every winner, there's got to be a loser. And we've seen our equity being transferred upstream over the last 40 years. We had vibrant communities, and I'll take Menindee as a prime example, citrus, grapes. And potentially a first market provider. Ideal dry climate for growing stone fruits, table grapes, citrus, and it's all been taken away. And that equity has been transferred upstream. And we need someone to take control, with the power to take control, the big stick approach, and to hand water out, to regulate water, and to ensure that people play the game, only take their equitable share. So the hierarchy of water use is clearly spelled out in law.
Just explain that for people who don't know.
The priority of water use in federal law and in state law is directed to the highest. The first user is supposed to be the environment. The second user is the mum and dad farmers and the communities that live and work this river. At the bottom of this totem is irrigation. And unfortunately, this has all been turned on its head for one reason or another by political pressure. And it's a key point. The hierarchy of water use is clearly spelled out. The law puts it out there in black and white, but it's being ignored. And governments have, through poor policy, have not followed this through or enforced it.
So we have, sounds like we know what the answer is to this sort of management issue, but what's missing is political will. For anyone watching this who lives in Sydney and they're hearing your story, they're really concerned about what's going on with the river. What should they do? Like, can they head down to Macquarie Street and meet with the minister, or what would you encourage people to do?
The question for those living in Sydney is that they walk out their front door every morning, right? And the minute they do that, and even in their own house, but the minute they do that, there's certain laws they've got to uphold, right, to be able to get to work, go to work, come back, okay? Government don't seem to do that. So why make legislation if it's not going to be police for want of a word, and it's not going to be followed through? So the hierarchy of water use is a typical example of that. Right, so whether it's just to make us feel good, right, well it doesn't, because they don't do anything with it. Okay, so it's just a basic, law and order thing. That's for starters, and that's where this water thing needs to come back to, right? Follow the legislation.
And those people on the eastern seaboard who are watching, they need to get in contact with their local member, and they need to express that we need a change. We need to develop a political will to solve this issue for all Australians, not for those who live at the top of the water source.
They're making two, look, I don't know, they're making two classes of people out of this, right? And that's sad. There's no need for it,
when it comes to a natural resource as well, like it should be equitable.
So the sense of entitlement, and one thing I would implore before I get on the sense of entitlement, one thing I would implore those living in the eastern seaboard is please don't go and start, hanging irrigators from the roof, It's not what it's about. And it's really important, what we'd like to see is the old family farm come back into play, because I think you'd all agree that the vast majority of family farms employ locals, they shop locally, they are usually a lot more responsible with land use, and all those sorts of things. So it's really important that they don't single out irrigators, for want of a word, and they start yelling from the print, they ought to be capital punishment should come back in, because it's not what it's about. But they also need to drop their sense of entitlement to this. and that's government have enabled them to do that. Right? So what's the common denominator about this? It's government. It is the management that government has portrayed, right? And one of my biggest thing is you don't know from government one day from another what they're thinking about it all. We can see an easy fix to it.
Yeah.
Some of it's going to take time to do, right? It can't happen overnight. It just can't, right? But it's got to start, and once you do that, but as Jacqui said, the political will to do it is just not there.
Yeah.
So that's what the people in the Eastern Seaboard need to change, right? They need to remind ministers of the Crown, and they need to be following the law.
Yeah.
Government policy has, and their plan has been to direct water to the highest value. And what we've seen here is that the area, the collateral damage is what's happening. They've basically wiped the Barwon Darling and the Darling itself. And as a result of poor policy and the SGL adjustment, the Barwon Darling is the collateral damage for other people's gain. So the people out here aren't going to put up with it. But we need the help of the people in the cities. We need the help of the people on the eastern seaboard. Nearly 1,400 kilometres from Mungandai to Wentworth is the area we're talking about here. This area has been ticketed as the loser in this argument. It's Menindee Lakes, it's communities of Pooncarie, Menindee, Wilcannia, Tilpa, Louth, and Burke to a degree, through to Bawarrina, Kallara. These areas are the result of poor policy, and it will lead to the derogation, of nearly 1,400 kilometres of iconic river that we see behind us.
And you see it in the towns, don't you? Like, we were at Bawarrina a couple of nights ago, last night? No, night before last. Burke yesterday. We're going to Wilcannia this afternoon. There is a bit of consistency with what you see, which is these towns that have sort of got faded glory. You could tell that they were the lifeblood of the country, a century ago, and it's so much part of Australian identity. This region is at the heart of the sort of Australian story. But it seems like we're just letting it sort of perish and disappear.
Well, as far as Burke goes, Burke can't handle any more booms and busts the way it is, because it'll end up being a welfare town, and that's sad. Okay, but if they, in my opinion, if they throttle back and had and they're going to miss out every now and again. I know that, and I'm just using hypothetical figures. Say if there's 30,000 acres of cotton in Burke. Say, for example, they throttle that back to say 15,000. I think you would get an absolute steady, as it can be, right? And it would all, for the people of the town of Burke, okay? Therefore, you're going to get a few more businesses and you're going to go in there, okay? There's bugger all young people now, they're all clearing out, right? And you can't have that anymore.
Yep.
And this is a direct result on government management. So they pour millions and millions of dollars into towns like Burke and Bree and everything else. They're forgetting one thing. They don't add water to it. You can't make things grow without water.
Yep.
Right? And that's what, they know it. But they're quite willing to sweep all that under the carpet, right? For what? For corporatisation of the river.
Yep.
It's no sense involved in it. It's just political.
Yeah. So you want to talk about A-class licences a bit?
A-class licences are the licences that let people extract water at the lowest level. These low flows are the lifeblood of the river, in that these flows come regularly, well, they should come regularly, and add nourishment to the river. Communities, environment, and everything associated with it. A-class licences gives permission to access the lower flows. These licences only are a small component of all licences, and there's two ways to manage these licences. Is to lift the pumping threshold, to lift the level to a level where it doesn't impact these fall flows. There's a proposal out there at the moment for the government, for not a lot of money, to actually buy these licences back from those people who legitimately own these licences. And it would be a very, very good move because it will help guarantee these small pulse flow events that are being impacted by extraction and poor policy again.
Right. So sort of just to rephrase that, just,
Dumb it down.
A-class licences for dummies. The river, even when the river is flowing at sort of its lowest level, some people have got a licence to pull water out of it.
Yep.
Because of what they're doing.
Look, that's right. I'll go back a step. A-class licences traditionally, back when licences were issued, were only for growing feed for the garden and for growing essential fodder for their horse plant, usually.
Yep.
So that's what A-classes are. They're only small licences,
Yep.
but the process was bastardised. It was bastardised back in 2012, or actually before that, where A-class licences were commercialised and they were turned into a licence which could be extracted in huge volumes and could be used to grow other crops. So, two options here. We either remove A-class licences from the system, which will protect the low flows, or we revert those licences back to what they were, which were the licences to sustain mum and dad farmers grow their veggies and feed their animals.
Yep.
So one of the A-class licence, this is one of the things now, when the drought was on, God, I was freighting grain in from over 1,300 k's away, right, and hay, right. So one of the A-class licence, a lot of these fellows up and down the river will be growing fodder. That enabled me to go 50 k's maybe to go and up to a point, and instead of 1,300 and something k's.
Yep.
So what Justin says, they've been bastardised, which I totally agree with him.
Yep.
So they were actually there for put on permanent plantings.
Yep.
So for example, in 2012, permanent planting, growing of lucerne was taken off the permanent planting list by, which is, for us, it's just a small thing,
Yeah.
but those little things,
Yep.
right, is what's causing this.
Yeah. And just in terms of who owns A-class licences now, what's the sort of breakdown?
Look, there's a percentage owned by corporate interests, and there's a percentage owned by mum and dad farmers who not going to work. But
so a corporation owning an A-class licence is almost a contradiction in terms, isn't it?
well, it is. It's a contradiction to the intent of the original licence, and the intent of the original licence is important in this context, as I explained, because that were the licences that let people grow fodder for their crops, for their animals, and let them put food on the table.
Yeah.
So
and are A-class licences tradable?
They are.
Yeah. So the A-class licence originally, you weren't allowed any more than 150 mil or 6-inch pump.
Right.
They had to go directly onto a crop. So your citrus, your permanent plantings.
Right.
It's no longer the case. You can put them in storage.
Right. You can store A-class water.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, you consider in a storage now, depending on who you talk to, and this is more down Justin's neck of the woods, but my understanding was, depending how good your off-river storage was, you're going to lose 55 or 6%, 2/3 to 66% in evaporation over a 12-month period. Right? So there's I've got an issue with that, and so should most people. We can't afford to lose that anymore. You're talking about an A-class licence, right? And you start plucking out of the river when it's only just,
Yeah.
and then losing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just doesn't.
Yeah. It's right.
One thing I'd like to see done, Chris, is talking about it earlier, is put these natural rock bars back into the system. And thanks, Bucky.
Got to whip for something.
What I'd like to see happen, and what I'd like the people listening to, when they're talking to their local member, encourage your local member to push the concept of putting the natural rock bars back into the river. These rock bars were blown out by the paddle boat people back around the turn of the century to let them get their paddle boats through. These rock bars were naturally in the river. They naturally provided habitat for the indigenous people prior to European settlement. They provide environmental havens for fish, for native plants. So really like to see the natural rock bars reinstated to the Barwon Darling, because this will return a natural balance to the system and will satisfy a lot of the issues which are problematic at the moment.
What's it like when the river's in flood and full flow around here? What's it like here? What's it like at your place, Stuart?
Probably a gold mine. But look, you just notice so much difference, with the environment after you get a flood. And we know, I've sat there, for an hour at a time and watched water coming up and going down these big, black cracks in the black ground, right? Then come back a couple of hours later and it still hasn't moved anywhere. And it just does everything. It just revitalises not only those that are on the place, just environmentally, it revitalises everything. And and when, and especially the river, it's good, healthy, clean water. It might be a bit dirty, but it's and when you haven't got that, for those, I don't know how to describe the stink of it when you're showering in water, right? And the best way I can describe it is, you're going between, the Tuapara Canyon. There's been a bit of roadkill on the road for about a week. That's what it smells like, and that's what we've got to shower in. Right? You got salt. You can't keep any gardens alive. Your veggie patch usually starts to, stock don't do any good on it. And it's just a complete and utter mess. But having that high, that water, that flood and everything else, it's a gold mine for everybody. Right? Matter of fact, I'll go
life, isn't it?
Well, it is. I'll go one step further, and most people in the city might understand this. It's like they're getting a pink diamond for Christmas.
Right.
Sounds glorious.
So Menindee Lakes, the water saving project, we've been hearing a lot about that. What's your take on it?
They've got it wrong, I think. As I said earlier, the SDDL project has identified a water saving in Menindee. By taking that water out of Menindee, it obviously frees up water for other areas. Fundamentally, they really need to reassess it, because this area is not going to put up with being collateral damage for another region. We haven't got the population, but what we do have is an iconic river that has so many environmentally significant species, and the people aren't going to put up with it. They're not going to put up with fish kills. They're not going to put up with a dead river for 1,400 kilometres for someone else's gain. We're all Australians. Sharing water is the name of the game, and let's enhance what we've got in this iconic country.
You've both come from families that have been farming this land for decades, if not longer. But I've also heard you both talking quite passionately about the local environment around here, which sort of reminds me that there's a lot of politicians, there's a lot of media commentators who try to sort of either make out that farmers don't care about the environment, or that farmers and environmentalists are always natural enemies. What do you say about that?
Well, that's not right, because the best farmers and the long-term farmers, such as ourselves, the proof is that we are here. We have to be environmentalists to actually sustainably farm what we have here, and that's why we're here. We've got to live hand in hand with nature, because we're not going to destroy the resource for profit. We're not here to rape and pillage and move away. We're here for the long term. We're here for our children and our children's children. So farmers must be the best environmentally conscious people to do the job right. And okay, our families have been here for a long time, and I guess that's proof. There are bad farmers out there. There are organisations, individuals who have raped and pillaged the system. So there needs to be a better control of who manages our country, because management of our country is the key. You can be a good irrigator, you can be a sustainable irrigator, you can be a sustainable farmer, you can be a sustainable grazier. You've got to do it right, and do it for the future, not for short term.
Stuart, you want to say?
Yeah, I will totally endorse what Justin's saying, and I think just to put it in perspective, every time this river goes dry, we as stock owners, we might have a bit of feed, we as stock owners then shift out to somewhere else. We might be trying to spell a paddock, we might, right? And it puts more financial hardship and more environmental hardship on what we're trying to do. And when you get out of bed in the morning and think, look, I know this is not right, but how in the bloody hell do I get around it? Right? And when you think about it, we're not causing this. Right? We're actually asking, right, to some sort of balance be put back in there to stop all this happening. Now, this is up and down the river, and I think it goes for the family farm, whether you're an irrigator and everything else. They're getting forced into things, right, that are wrong. And government are doing that now. I don't care what they say, but they're the most irresponsible environmental, as far as land care goes, because they're making decisions for the wrong reason. Right? We need them to make the decision for the right reason. There is no reason why, as Justin said, there cannot be sustainability up and down the river. Doesn't matter what you do. Whether you're Indigenous or whether you're a Catholic, whether you're a Mormon or whether you're an irrigator or whether you're a grazier, there should be sustainability there. We can't, with these decisions being made on political or whatever grounds. Right? It's not going to work, and this Barwon Darling is a really good testament. We'll see how it doesn't work.
Justin, Stuart, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for talking to us. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say you have our support, and anything we can do to support you, just say the word.
No, thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris and Jacqui. Thank you very much.
It's important that people understand what we do out here. We're a long way from the coast. There's a lot of people on the coast who don't actually appreciate what we do. If any good thing's going to come out of COVID and what we have now is that Australians are actually going to come inland.
People are coming out.
And understand and appreciate what we've actually got at home.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage people to come out and have a look and understand exactly what we've got and why we can't afford to lose what we've got, this resource. Because it is iconic, it's beautiful, it's everything that you don't know. So come and have a look and come and appreciate it. We're not geared up for you people, don't worry about that. And we're just not used to it happening. So
maybe you'll get a decent road if you get some more Sydney people coming out here.
It's not chalk and
What's wrong with the road?
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah,
No,
that was really helpful.
Appreciate it.